Welcome. I'll quickly introduce myself and then I'll pass over to you, Andrea, and we can get started. So my name's Sarah Downs. I do know most of you on the call. I'm based in Aberdeen and run a consultancy called Ducaru. We focus on revenue growth and sales team performance using data-driven insight, and mostly working in the energy and technology sectors. A little bit out with that, but not very much. And I've been really passionate over, especially the last couple of years, as this sales landscape is changing so quickly. It's just having regular roundtables. Some of you have attended these before. Welcome back. And for some of you, it's the first time, where I'll bring in guests to join me just so that we could get a real good conversation going on the current challenges, what companies are doing that's working, what's not working, and add any value that we can. So I'm just going to pass over to my colleague, Andrea, to introduce himself, and then we can get started.
Thanks, Sarah, and welcome everyone. So happy to see you, some familiar faces, but also some new faces. So I'm very happy to connect. And so, yeah, about me, coming from the industry, so primarily the energy industries, as probably most of you, but not all of you. So I've been in the oil and gas industry for 20 years. I had leadership and executive roles for most of this time, working in 7 different countries all over the world. And I ended up in the UK, where I'm right now. So I'm living in London. And yeah, I'm a high performance leadership advisor. So that's what I do. So I help an organization, primarily executive, to increase the level of performance by unlocking human potential. And that's essentially, in a nutshell, what I do. So sales is, why sales? Because sales is not only part of my work, if you like, but I've been also in most of you guys' shoes before, because I led sales team for a number of years in my past corporate career. So that's an area that for me is super interesting, and because there is so much to learn, but as well as too much, I think, to improve. So back to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Andrea. So prior to starting this session in the registration, we asked a couple of questions, which most of you have answered, not all, but most of you. And what we were really trying to gauge was, what are the top challenges for you right now? Now, we have businesses on this call from startup level right through to large multinationals. Most of you are leading sales teams or about to start leading sales teams. And therefore, we did see quite a common thread through your answers, which I have tried to put together here. So these are some of the challenges you guys have brought to the table, and some of the strategies that you've been working on in the last 12 months to try and, increase revenue, performance, alignment, diversity. There's a number of things mentioned. What I didn't want to do is put names to answers, of course, because that is your information. But we did absolutely see a common thread here. And I'm sure for all of you that did answer the questions, you're going to see, some of your answers without, listing the entire thing. That is the only slides we have, so don't worry. We have our questions and your answers. And I just thought this would be really helpful to kind of get started on the conversation. Now, we're going to focus on the challenges today and weave in the strategies as we go. Because strategies on their own don't tell us quite so much as the challenge until we start talking about how they're working, if they are, if they're not. So let's start with some of the challenges. We can, obviously share some of our insight just from working with lots of different companies and some insight on this. And then we'd also love to hear from you guys, especially those of you that have noted these challenges in your responses. Like I said, we've got an hour, so there's quite a lot here, and that means we're not going to be able to spend 30 minutes per point. And I would like to try and touch at least a little bit on all of them, because you guys have actively provided these challenges, and I want to make sure you get at least a little bit of help. If anybody leaves this call today and feels like they've not had enough, or they want to know a little bit more, based on data that we're going to share with you, research that we're going to share with you, please do reach out to either of us. Happy to set up a conversation if you want to dig a bit deeper, or we can set up another event focusing in on for example, one challenge if it's something that's going round in circles a little bit, which sometimes happens. So the first one here, keeping the sales team motivated. This is something that I think is important for all teams, not just sales teams, and is something that all business leaders struggle with from time to time. Now, thankfully, we have Andrea with us, who is a neuroscience expert and has worked a lot on motivating teams. So I would like to pass over to you just to give us a little bit of insight into motivation, and then we can kick off some conversation on that. Andrea.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Yes, it's a good start because I think it's from my even personal experience, motivation is the key. And I suppose for most of you guys, keeping motivating your team has been a challenge, particularly right now during, all this remote working situation. And I've, talking with clients and people and friends, I realized that is a big problem right now. So I'm glad actually to see this as a challenge because that was also one of our title actually when we set up this event. So just to set the scene here, I'm not a doctor, so I don't have a PhD. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I know neuroscience and apply it to my work. But what I would like to say here is from my personal experience as well, what the science is telling you right now is the power of motivation really starts from the inside, is what is called intrinsic motivation. For many sales leaders, there's been always this assumption that in order to motivate your team, you need to either pay them more or give more extra rewards, money, status, title. Sorry, but forget about this case because that's not what is going on when it comes to motivation. And it's very interesting data I would like to share with all of you has been done in research in the US. They say essentially up to $75,000, right? You motivate people with money. Above $75,000, that motivation factor is not working anymore because essentially you satisfy the primary needs of people. So if we think that we already maybe pay 70, 80, 90K to the salespeople and we start get increasing, unfortunately, we are not going to unlock any further motivation to these people. So that extrinsic motivation is not working as unfortunately many people think. So the question about, I would like to go back to you because that is not a lecture, of course, is what you think about this, how you motivate your team and how you help them to increase their intrinsic motivation. When I say intrinsic motivation, is essentially we're talking about a strong drive. And when I say drive, is essentially is a mix of curiosity, passion, and purpose. So these are the three main factors that really help people to get the drive to sell, the drive to perform, the drive to do an extra step. So the question is, do you help your guys actually to increase the level of curiosity? Do you have a strong purpose? Do you allow them to have passion? Another couple of important elements are clearly the autonomy. And that is one of the major important factors when it comes to motivation. Do you give them enough autonomy to build their goals according to the purpose that they have? And finally, and I'm going to stop here, Sarah, if you agree with me, is about mastery. Do we allow our people to master the skill they have? Are they really top-notch in their skill set based on what they do? So these are the things I would like to, to start throwing to the audience, because that is what is happening right now when it comes to motivation. So yeah, I'm going to stop here. So I don't know, Sarah, how you want to play this. Maybe open up maybe to the audience and see what is your view on this. Do you agree on intrinsic motivation? Or maybe you have done primarily extrinsic motivation and maybe you don't see the same results. So I'm very interested to hear your feedback on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to back up what Andrea was saying, we are doing a lot of sales competency assessment, data-driven, and based on a 2.2 million database or data set across the world in sales professionals, what we do know is that 74% of salespeople are intrinsically motivated.
There you go.
13% are extrinsically motivated. So that's by material things, money, and only 1% altruistic, which is not a bad thing because altruism and sales does not go well together. So when, and a few of you spoke about the sort of restructure of compensation packages, looking at, you know, what more you can do with bonuses and incentives. I think a lot of the time they can be very much focused on the extrinsic nature, but that's only touching on that 13%. So I would love to hear from you guys. What have you been doing, or even yourselves, if you've started in sales and moved into more management, you know, do you agree with this? Have you felt it? You know, what are you doing to motivate?
I mean, money is a motivator. I'm not saying there is not, just to make it clear. The question though is, it will never be enough. It will never be enough until the other things I shared before are in place. So, and that's the good news actually for sales leaders, right? Because if you can work on helping your people to build intrinsic motivation, you can essentially pay even less, but because you're going to focus really on the things that are going to really make a difference for them. I think that is super important as well for the new generation, right? Because there's been a lot of conversation about, you know, what the, for example, the millennial, maybe let's say the second part of the millennial and the Gen S they're looking for, right? When it comes to when join organization. And what is very clear now, that the sense of purpose for them is the most important thing, as well as flexibility. That's why many younger generation right now, they do prefer the flexibility of remote working, because that's exactly one of the major values that they are looking for, right? However, the good news is, if you're really giving to them a great sense of purpose, great goals to achieve, and see the opportunity for them to grow in the organization, to improve more skills, so to become, in other words, a better version of themselves, you're already giving something super valuable for them. And I sometimes think that is understated, because we think, oh my gosh, it's not going to be enough for them. They need more money. In reality, it's not. So I just want to comment on this. A great point. I actually have a question on the back of that to everyone. Is one of the things I've noticed is, I mean, actually, it's an interesting question because we can link it as well to other challenges if it comes to performance as well, to results, is the remote working has certainly impacted or affected not only results to some extent, but also, and that's my experience, the wellness and the status, if you like, the mental health as well. We have to say this, right, of many people, including salespeople. And the salespeople, as we know, unfortunately, they're working already under a lot of pressure, because they have a pressure to get results, the pressure from the top, the pressure from the clients, there are the numbers. So I'm very interested to hear from you guys is, what have you done that maybe worked, maybe didn't, in terms of actually release this pressure to let them perform at the best of their abilities? Or maybe because you felt the pressure as well as a business, maybe you transfer to some extent that pressure as well to the salespeople. Because I've been in both shoes, right? As a salesperson, but also as a sales leader. And I know that when the situation is challenging for any reason, that pressure, builds up, and then say, okay, what can I do with this pressure? Shall I transfer the pressure to my people, or shall I keep it for myself and let them perform, in a great autonomy and feeling at their ease, because they're also facing other challenges, right? For working from home, the kids, the family, the burnout, the technology stress. So I'm very interested to hear your thought, because it's really well connected, Sarah, about the remote working, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's a great question, a great point, and I know in most disciplines they've actually managed to evidence now an increase in productivity, but it's not something we are seeing across the board in sales. And there's that lack of support often, and people that are used to working remotely in sales are often traveling. And I know many of you on the call working for international companies have been used to that, where you're working remotely, but you're always with people. So if you're extroverted and you get your energy from other people, it can be really difficult to keep up that positive energy when you're under such a high pressure environment. And it comes to some of your points around the Zoom fatigue and lack of face-to-face selling as well. It'd be great to hear from the group. Yeah, that's great feedback. I've definitely noticed a change from getting more face to face again. Would
Yeah.
anyone else like to share, whether it's your own experience, or are you noticing a difference with your team now that you're maybe starting to travel a bit more or do more face to face, depending on obviously which region you're in at the moment?
Yeah, I think I'm very interested to hear how you essentially how you dealt with pressure. If you felt pressure during this, at least last 12 months, or maybe 18 months, 20 months. So how you dealt with pressure from a sales angle? So, and as well, what did you notice in your sales team dealing with pressure in this remote working environment? Because that's very interesting, because I have a feeling that some of them actually probably have, has been able to thrive, because he built some very high performing habits in order to deal exactly well, working from home, focus on the client. And then I'm going to tell you a little more about the focus, but really big focus on results on the client in a perfect environment. For others, been just a mess, right? Because it was impossible to work from home. There was, lack of face-to-face meeting. So interesting to hear how you and your team actually have dealt with this. That's very interesting.
The other few points there as well is on things like technology. So when we're running the data analysis, we're looking at remote working all the time. And some of the findings we've had, certainly from some of the larger corporates with regional sales teams, is this technology piece. So what we've realized is that some people for the last year have been turning up to client Teams and Zoom calls off camera, or they're on camera, but you're looking at their foreheads and things, not having that, I guess, self-awareness and confidence in the technology. And the similar things a few of you had noted about social selling. Social selling is not just about having a LinkedIn profile. There's some real key strategies to get success and reach out. We've spoken here about lead generation and new client engagement, but also how do we manage and maintain the relationships of existing accounts? A lot of that, again, has had to come through the technology. So that support and, to reduce the stress and to optimize the performance on the team is not just saying to someone, do you know how to use Zoom, Teams, and LinkedIn? It's really going that little bit deeper with them. And I've been quite amazed, Andrea, at how many people haven't actually been aware that their sales teams have actually been turning up, maybe in a way that they weren't sure of, because they come to the team meetings on camera. But then, when I've done some shadowing and coaching with the salespeople, they've actually been turning up to client meetings off camera, which is quite awkward. If you've ever been in a one-on-one, Zoom or a Teams environment, and you're on camera and the other person isn't, it can't, it doesn't start off too well.
Well, there is one thing I would like to share about focus, because it's really related to remote working. So first of all, it's normal. It's actually normal to see a decrease of productivity during the remote working, because it's normal. But that's interesting. It is normal at the beginning. I don't know what you think about this, but what I've noticed in my client, but also in the teams, etc., is the beginning. It's a big change, right? And when there is a change, we are facing, the question we ask ourselves: how can we make a change to make it, to be productive again, to be more effective again, to have a high performance, regardless the content environment, right? So, but because we are creatures of habits, we learn new habits, and then we get well with that. So I think my experience is the first month has been very challenging for many people, especially for sales people, actually, particularly for them. But then after the first 3-6 months, they learn how to deal in the remote working. So that's that experience I would like to share. But there's one thing that is very important, is about focus. There's been a research done by McKinsey, funny enough. They measure the productivity, the performance in 10 years' time, having changed something about their focus. And I want to go into the science, but it's called the flow state. So for those people, they heard about this word. Flow state essentially means living in the present moment. be in the moment, right? And when we do things, attending meeting, writing a proposal, writing a contract, doing a creative work with the client, we need a level of focus, right? It's not just a focus on beyond the task at home, but it's also when you deal with clients. So they measure how the productivity and performance has changed by applying new habits or behaviors that actually really help to be into that state, to be into the present moment. You guess what? 5 times more productivity, more performance, just by changing the habits and helping people to be super focused on what they were doing. And that, Sarah, is back to the point I was saying before. If we build the intrinsic motivation to people, it will be much, much easier to reach that flow state and be really focused on the present moment. So I think the question for you, Sarah, and for all of you is, do you think that your people has a very high level of focus, or they're maybe too much distracted by so many other things? They're not necessarily providing value or results or returns to the business. That's, I think, is interesting conversation. Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that leads in as well to how we set, I guess, the measurement and the KPIs for sales teams as leaders, because there's a huge focus on X amount of calls, X amount of meetings, X amount of events online. And a lot of these numbers have increased because, you know, management teams understand that we're not having to commute or to travel, that they feel like most people are available because they're all working from home, which, as we know, is not necessarily the case, because everyone is blocking out hour to hour all day. And I'm sure many of you are on meetings all day and are catching up in the evening with your actual workload. And it's the same for the salespeople. They're being expected often to do too much within that, you know, day, and they're going, you know, from here to here all the time, which in itself can tire us out, you know, emotionally. It can take away some of that focus. But when we look at some of the challenges the group have come up with here, it's really around that, you know, sales process. You know, it's from, you know, the lead generation right through to the account management, everything in the middle, and how we get the sales team performing, you know, there. And that also drives back to the intrinsic motivation, because if people feel like they're being developed and supported, then that's obviously going to support that intrinsic nature within the 74% that are intrinsic. And that goes across salespeople, sales management, and sales leaders. What's quite worrying in some of the data, and I have it here at my fingertips actually, is only 66% of sales managers actually think motivating their sales team is up to them and is their job. And if we go above the management into leadership, now depending on the size of your company, that could be the managing director, it could be the vice president, senior vice president, or even the CEO, just whoever the sales managers are feeding into. When we look at motivation, 62% of them think it's their job and are actually actively trying to get involved with this. They focus instead a lot on performance, coaching, training, which some of you have put into the strategic piece here, but without really going back and understanding what needs done, where they can develop them as individuals rather than as a team. So I'm sure most of you have been in those sales teams where you're all thrown into a classroom on a course about something, but actually you're all needing development in different areas. And are they coachable? You know, 25% of the people I assess aren't coachable in the first place. So if you then throw them into a training environment or force coaching at the wrong time with the wrong, you know, focus to it, you're not going to get ROI. And it's not going to support that intrinsic nature within them either, because you're putting them into your box instead of theirs. So just to focus now on some of this process stuff, which always goes back to motivation if we get it right anyway, I guess my question to you guys is, what have you done to understand your team? To, yes, understand their motivation. And I had a recent meeting with a sales manager who had 8 people in his sales team, and he was having a few performance issues with 2 of them. And I said, well, what motivates John and, you know, Bob, just pulling names out? And he said, oh, just wait a moment. We were on a Zoom call and I could see him, you know, looking at a screen. And I said, what are you looking for? He said, I have an Excel spreadsheet here somewhere that lists the answer to that question from last year's appraisal. Now, if you are the sales manager, you're the person that's meant to be motivating these people. These are the questions we should be able to answer about our team. It doesn't matter how junior or senior they are. So I know, like, some of you may have a lot, you know, some sales leaders have hundreds of people in their team. I understand you're not going to know it all off the top of your head, but there's usually a sales manager within sort of subdivision of that. And it's these individuals that need to go in depth. You know, they need to be having the conversations, and the answer's never, they want to climb the ladder. You know, they want to be the BD director one day. If you ask the questions in the right way, it will go much deeper than that. Maybe they're always looking for continuous development or, you know, challenge, etc. So I think on the motivation and performance is, you know, please do take that seriously, because the data shows us a lot of sales leaders are not. And you probably feel it. If you're the sales manager and you have the sales leader above you, you know, do you think your boss could, you know, answer that question about you? I'm sure there'll be lots of shaking heads right now. But that is really basic stuff, but so powerful as well. And we really see it move the needle in sales teams and performance as well. Anyone want to add something at this stage?
Just a quick one on building on what you said, Sarah. Is also a principle of influence, by the way, because you know, we are talking about sales team right now, but if we extend it to teams in general, you know, even in other function, is exactly the same thing. It's not inside out your people, and that's the starting point actually of having every manager. That's what they're supposed to do. But unfortunately, for a reason or for another, I think sometimes managers, they get, you know what, yes, we work as a team, we have a team, I need to influence the team, I need to communicate to the team. In reality, studies saying that that's not how influence works with people. The best way to influence people, to make sure that you can really engage them, mobilize them, is actually knowing exactly what is going on in each of them, starting from the motivation, but as well as what are the goals. What are their expectations as well? So setting expectation, framing success is super important. But it has to be one-to-one, one person at a time, because unfortunately it's not going to work in other ways. So great point, Sarah.
And also, what are we doing to, you know, understand their competency? Because quite often, you know, you're going to hire salespeople because of gut feel, or because they did well at your competitor, or so-and-so said they were great at what they did. They come into your business and you don't see the results. And that's because a lot of it, yes, there's competency, skills, but there's also the culture, which again talks to what we were doing. But I pulled some data just before coming on the call, which I'll share with you guys about salespeople, some global averages in that 2.2 million, and see if, you know, if this hits home. So 73% of salespeople can hunt, but only 50% of those understand how to reach the decision makers. So because someone's showing you hunting evidence, are they reaching the right people for you in your business? Maybe that's something you need to look at with them. Only 42% of them understand consultative selling. So again, even if they get into the right places, are they understanding the questions to ask, you know, the information that needs to uncover to understand whether this is going to move on or is not, should move on or should not as well. And 51% of them understand how to qualify leads. So that means that you can give them, you know, the list, the targets. You know, many of you are working in the oil and gas space. You know, is that target list all the operators or all the drilling contractors, etc., for example? But do they really understand what they need to look for? And when you're doing your pipeline management, can you really trust the data if your team don't understand how to qualify? And sometimes they can follow process in qualification if you have a really in-depth sales CRM, for example. But if they're not understanding it, are they really going to bring that into the conversations along the way? 29% of them can close. Now, if they can consultatively sell, they don't need to be able to close at the end. they'll close out every step of the way. But if you're in a more transactional environment, or if you don't have a consultative sales team, closing is really important. So maybe some of you, and I know from some of the comments that came in through the Zoom registration, some people feel like you're getting in the right doors, you're getting so far and it's getting stuck. This is probably through a lack of qualification, consultative selling, and then obviously closing at the end. So a lot of sales leaders, and especially if you've come from more of a technical background, maybe you've not grown up in sales yourself or in more of a commercial space, you've grown up as an engineer or in IT or something more technical and haven't been in that world, you may assume that hiring in a salesperson that they know all this stuff. But unfortunately, that's often not the case. Okay, and that doesn't even start with who's coachable and who isn't. So when I look at some of your challenges that are on screen right now, we look at lead generation. Maybe people are hunting, but using older means. They're used to going to the big exhibitions, getting their 200 business cards and then doing the follow-up. But it's been amazing if you just think about technology. In the last year, I've worked with companies that are multi-billion-dollar companies that still don't have a CRM system. They're still working off Excel spreadsheet, which is terrifying. And I'm like, how are you making decisions as management? Where's your data-driven insights? How do you know what's actually in your pipeline and how qualified it is? And then you've got people that are just starting to take LinkedIn seriously. And you made such a great point there that, this is kind of the way it is now going forward. Yes, of course, we're going to get more face-to-face again and more travel than we have right now. But, if you look at recent reports from the likes of Gartner, by 2025, they expect 80% of all B2B supplier and buyer engagements to be done online. And it's not that salespeople have just woken up and thought, I'm going to sell like this now. It's because as consumers, if we think about how we buy stuff personally, whether it's a vacation, a car, anything, we're so driven by online purchasing decisions now. So you wouldn't just go and visit 10 houses if you wanted to buy a property. You would look at the 10, online as in-depth as you can and narrow it down to the 4, and then you're qualifying throughout. If you want to buy a vacation, you're not going to go to the hotel's website anymore and trust their photoshopped images and how amazing they say they are. You're going to go to TripAdvisor because you want third-party validation. And third-party validation is what our buyers don't actually get when we're face-to-face with them. They get more of that online. So the buyers are trusting a lot of their decisions more now that are coming from online versus face-to-face. The way things have been done the last 18 months are very different. But actually, it's not like we're going to flip it and go back to the way it was. It's about moving forward in a more, hybrid strategy.
A couple of things as well on this, Sarah, because you both, brought this up, and a great point, actually. So one is we have to be careful there are not some limiting belief there, because limiting belief actually is something that we create on ourselves and say, I can't sell online. I can't build a relation online. I can't get a client online. I can't get a contract online. That is a limiting belief, because the reality, what you just shared, Sarah, is I think our day-to-day experiences, right? I mean, I work on a B2B space. I do consulting in my line of work, and I've been working in organizations, US, Canada, Italy, other countries, everything online with also large teams. So that's possible. That's absolutely possible with clients that never met in person. So I wonder whether we have to be careful of see a complexity as a limiting belief, as an obstacle, because maybe it's just a limiting belief of our salespeople. So it has to be, I think it's a very good point in terms of qualifying the right salespeople, because they have to be, in my mind, at least in my experience, they need to have that level of experience, but also the flexibility to build their relation online, because we are not going back, exactly as you said. So, and the hybrid work is going to stay. It's going to stay. So that is the reality. So there will be less face-to-face meetings. There will be less offline events, because they're expensive. There are a lot of traveling around, and many people, they're not happy because they're not getting any return, because they're just exchanging business card. So we have to be very careful of playing, say, you know what, we are going back to normal as soon as everything opens up, because the scenario has changed irreversible. So it's a great point, absolutely great point.
Yes, and when we look at the long sales cycles, which a number of you brought up, you know, if we allow that mindset to come back of I have to meet people before I can close a deal, or I have to fly to the US to have this meeting because they're Mr. BP, for example, if we allow that to come back in, you can all bet you know, that it's gonna, those long sales cycles are gonna get even longer, because a lot of the buyers are no longer used to giving you that same time. And therefore, it's going to take them time to adjust as well. And everything I think about, I think the buyers in mind, because it's not about us choosing how we want to do business. It's about us following the direction of the buyer a lot of the time to understand their processes, what some of their maybe limiting beliefs are. But if a salesperson is sitting there right now thinking, I'm not going to bother with LinkedIn because in a year's time, I'm not going to need it, or I'm not going to worry too much about online because in a few months' time, I'll be able to travel the world again. I'll be back to business cards, which I don't know, you know, German-fested pieces of cardboard. Are people going to be, you know, transferring them over? I don't know. Digital cards are obviously now a thing. But this whole just face-to-face, getting out there, I guess opening the top of the sales funnel with the 200 or the 1,000 business cards, depending on size of exhibition, and then doing all the hard work to filter. Is it not much easier doing that qualification and filtering up front?
Totally. And by the way, and Colin actually made a very good comment on the chat, Sarah. And so maybe you have a look. While I want to share something very interesting, I heard in an incredible podcast, an interesting research they've done in the US from a branding perspective, right? And that is very, very amazing, because 65% or 70% of people in US, they buy by giving the priority, you guess what, guys? Not to the website, not to the offer, not to the team members, to testimonials. So 65, 70% of people, they buy by reading testimonial. So imagine that, what the impact can make on those businesses. Actually, they really get the right, because we can talk actually for another hour how to get the right testimonial, because there is a lot of misunderstanding in my mind about getting a testimonial. But you see the power of online, just having a great testimonial from clients. So that's interesting research. Unfortunately, I don't have it handy, but I'm happy to share if I find it, because that has been, for me, has been, you know, wow, because, you know, I was expecting, oh, you know, well, I buy essentially because, you know, word of mouth, maybe by reputation, maybe brand name, and maybe the website. No, it's testimonials.
Yeah. And that kind of touches on someone's point, and new strategies they've been trying out was this asking for client referral as well.
Yes.
So, you know, a lot of the time we're trying to turn these, I guess, prospects to clients and then to champions or our brand. But what a lot of us are not great at doing, and I've certainly been guilty of this, is not saying, okay, you've told me I've done a great job for you. Fantastic. Who else do you know I could help? They say some names. Would you mind making an introduction? And naturally, those introductions will say something nice about you and have that testimonial to it. You know, that's the basic level of client referrals. And then obviously there's full on referral and associate programs, which take it to another level, but can mean less salespeople and can mean actually other people talking about your brand and selling you, at least those really initial stage conversations, which you can then follow on, can actually be more powerful, because again, they're more like a testimonial or third-party validation. When I don't do it anymore, but I used to do a lot of outsource sales for companies, a number of years ago, and it was always much easier for me to open the door than it was for them. Even though they had the brand, they had the big company, it was easier for me to come in as like a third party under my own name, not as them, to have those initial conversations, especially when they were at really senior level. You start by understanding the people you have. Start by understanding the team. Until you know that and have, that could be data-driven approach, it could be spending a lot of time, having one-to-one conversations and competency assessments with people, but most leaders don't have time for that. Really get to know who's there, and then marry that up to your own strategies, your own processes, your own tools, softwares, etc., to understand how to optimize all of that. So optimize performance, yes, but really, with that's obviously going to come revenue growth, but not revenue growth that's going to deplete your margins. Revenue growth that's going to hold or even increase your margins, which is not going to happen if you throw people on training courses that shouldn't be trained in that area, if you throw money at technology that's no one's going to use, or you keep changing things in the company that's going to need investment, but you're not going to get the ROI. And I think, with that comes the motivation, the performance, the leadership, everything Andrea's been talking about the past hour. So great questions, Troy. Thank you for the 3 minutes to the bell prompt on that one. And happy to obviously have a deeper conversation. But we are just about coming to 4 o'clock in the UK, depends on where you are in the world. So a big thank you to everyone for giving us your time, for attending. Hopefully some of what we've said and also delegates on this call have said have even just started, that the cogs turning, starting some different thinking and mindset shift into, what is real sales leadership? What do we need to be thinking about to get that optimum performance? So I am going to provide myself and Andreas email addresses. Please feel free to take a photo or note these down. If you want to follow up with any of us or both of us, feel free. What we'll also do is follow up with you guys just with some interesting links to some of the data and some of the white papers that we've read recently around performance and motivation that we think could be of interest to you all. We'll follow up with that. And if anyone wants the recording as well, actually, I'll just send it to all of you. If you want it, you can have it. And if not, ignore it. That's fine. We'll send it out. So any last minute questions? And if not, we will call it a day and let you enjoy the sunshine.
Just want to say thank you, even from my side. It's been an awesome conversation. As imagined, that was just a very power hour. So I think from me, I think we try together to give you some insights, really, some ideas, insights. Of course, they need to be developed. They need to be, discussed more, either, with your own team or with us, doesn't really matter. But at least for me it's going to be a great takeaway. If you can get 2 or 3 ideas and start thinking, am I already doing this with my team? Or do I need to work a little bit more on these areas? So I think for a power hour, I think that is already a great outcome. But of course, Sarah and I were very happy to talk a little bit more if you want to. And thank you so much for joining us today. It's not a given spending 1 hour on Zoom these days. So thank you really so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.